The ear-piercing screech of brakes ripped through the stagnant air of Highway 9. The massive yellow school bus skidded violently across the asphalt, coming to a shuddering halt just inches away from a frail, scrawny creature. It was a stray dog. Despite the blaring horns and the driver's mounting fury, the dog refused to budge an inch. It stood its ground right in front of the bumper, barking frantically and desperately clawing at the pavement with its bleeding paws. Arthur, the driver, grabbed a heavy iron rod and stepped down from the bus, determined to chase the nuisance away and continue his journey. But as he raised the rod to strike, the stray lunged forward, not to attack, but to clamp its teeth onto the hem of Arthur's trousers, pulling him with all its might toward the dark underbelly of the bus. Confused and trembling with rage, Arthur finally knelt down to look, and what he saw hidden beneath that bus, filled with dozens of innocent schoolchildren, made his very blood run ice cold. What happened next? Truly shocked everyone. To truly understand the terrifying moment that just unfolded on the highway, and to know exactly why this emaciated creature was willing to bet its own life in front of a massive vehicle, we have to turn the clock back exactly 4 hours. It was a gloomy Friday morning. Heavy gray clouds hung low over the mountain range, signaling that a massive storm was about to make landfall. In a quiet little town nestled deep in the valley, Arthur, a 58-year-old man with graying hair and a gentle smile, was carefully buttoning up his uniform. He was a veteran school bus driver. For over 2 decades behind the wheel, the big yellow bus bearing the number 42 had become his second home. And the children on his daily route? They were his family. Ever since his wife passed away, Arthur poured all his love into this job. He knew every child by name. He knew that little Lily had a severe peanut allergy, and that young Tommy had asthma and always needed his inhaler close by. But today wasn't just a normal school day. It was the annual field trip for Oak Creek Elementary. Behind Arthur, sitting on those worn leather seats, were 40 excited little souls, laughing and chattering away. They carried their backpacks, their lunch boxes, and their dreams of a perfect camping trip in the National Forest over 60 miles away. But to get there, Arthur had to drive through Highway 9, a twisting, steep, and treacherous mountain pass, known as one of the most dangerous roads in the state, especially when it rains. Meanwhile, as Bus 42 was rumbling out of town, a harsh battle for survival was taking place at an isolated rest stop along the highway. Hidden behind some rusting dumpsters, a stray dog lay curled up, shivering in the biting cold of the changing season. Nobody knew his name. Nobody knew where he came from. The local kids would throw rocks at him and call him filthy, but for the sake of our story, let's call him Buster. Buster was a mutt with a faded yellow coat, matted with thick mud and unhealed bleeding wounds. He was so incredibly skinny that you could count every single rib, rising and falling with his labored breathing. Buster's eyes were always downcast, holding the profound sadness of a creature who had experienced far too much human cruelty. He survived day by day on moldy bread scraps thrown on the ground, constantly running from the brutal kicks of the gas station manager. At exactly 8:15 a.m., Arthur's bus pulled into this very rest stop to fill up the tank and let the kids use the restroom before tackling the hardest part of the mountain pass. The brakes squealed, the folding doors opened, and the children poured out like a flock of little birds. From his dark corner by the dumpsters, Buster poked his head out. His amber eyes watched the laughing children intently. He gave his tail a weak little wag, a natural reflex of a dog, desperate to be loved. He took a few timid steps toward the bus, perhaps hoping to find a dropped cookie on the asphalt. But as Buster got closer to the front wheels of the vehicle, his floppy ears suddenly twitched. His nose flared wildly. He froze. Something was wrong. Very, very wrong. With hearing dozens of times more sensitive than a human's, Buster detected a strange noise coming from deep underneath the heavy chassis. It was a faint, sharp crack, the sound of metal under extreme, failing pressure, and hidden beneath the smell of wet asphalt, his sharp nose caught a pungent, highly dangerous odor. Buster took another step, intending to stick his snout under the bus to investigate, when suddenly, shoo! "Get out of here, you filthy mutt!" The gas station manager roared, swinging a heavy iron pipe down against the pavement. A large rock flew through the air, striking Buster squarely in the ribs. The dog let out a piercing yelp of pain and fled in terror into the nearby bushes. From a distance, through the rain-streaked windows, the frail dog watched the bus doors slam shut. The engine roared to life. The massive vehicle slowly rolled away, carrying 40 innocent lives straight toward the deadly mountain pass. Ignoring the heavy rain now pouring down, ignoring the agonizing pain radiating from his shattered ribs, some primal, magnificent, and mysterious instinct took over Buster. He burst out of the bushes, drained every last ounce of energy he had left, and began chasing the massive bus like a madman. The rain grew heavier by the minute, soon turning into a raging storm that lashed violently against the windshield. The wipers on the bus worked at maximum speed, letting out an exhausted, rhythmic squeak. Highway 9 was now revealing its true form, a terrifying monster. The road was slick, and visibility had dropped to less than 60 feet. To the right was a sheer rock wall. To the left, a bottomless cliff hidden beneath thick fog. Arthur strained his eyes, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The old driver's heart pounded against his chest. He managed to keep a steady speed of 40 miles per hour. The children in the back had stopped their laughing. Curled up in their jackets, they had fallen asleep to the rocking motion of the bus. The silence inside was suffocating, broken only by the sound of the torrential rain beating against the metal roof. And then, out of nowhere, a small, dark shadow darted out from the edge of the road. Defying the blinding rain, it lunged right into the middle of the highway, standing dead center in the lane of the oncoming bus. Arthur's eyes went wide with sheer panic. Relying on decades of reflexes, he slammed his foot on the brake pedal. The massive tires locked up, grinding against the wet asphalt and creating an ear-piercing, horrific screech. The 10-ton bus lost its center of gravity. The back end swerved violently, skidding across the slippery road. The children woke up, screaming in terror. Backpacks flew through the air. The vehicle teetered dangerously, feeling as though it was about to tip over the edge of the cliff. But then, thanks to Arthur's masterful skills, he wrenched the steering wheel back. The giant machine shuddered to a halt, mere inches from the abyss. And the front bumper? It stopped less than 2 feet away. From the dark shadow, panting heavily, cold sweat drenching his forehead, Arthur stared through the glass. His absolute terror was instantly replaced by an explosive, blinding rage. Standing right in front of his bus was none other than the filthy stray dog from the gas station. Dear God, is it out of its mind? Arthur roared. He hastily flicked on the hazard lights, yelled for the kids to stay in their seats, grabbed a solid iron tire checker, and kicked the door open, stepping out into the pouring rain. The wind howled. Arthur marched toward the front of the bus. He raised the iron bar high in the air and shouted, "Get out! Get out of here right now. You almost killed us all." Normally, any wild animal faced with a furious human and a raised iron weapon would tuck its tail and run for its life. But not Buster. Despite his body shaking uncontrollably from the freezing rain and sheer exhaustion, despite the thunder cracking directly overhead, his paws remained glued to the asphalt. His soaked fur clung to his bones, but his eyes were wide and resolute. When Arthur stepped forward, intending to kick the dog off the road, Buster suddenly lunged, but he didn't bite the man's flesh. He opened his jaws, clamped down hard on the hem of Arthur's jeans, and used every ounce of his frail strength to pull him backwards. Towards the undercarriage of the bus, he pulled and he barked. It wasn't an aggressive bark. It was a desperate, agonizing, heartbreaking cry for help. But Arthur didn't understand. He was losing his patience. The sudden emergency braking had completely blocked the narrow mountain pass. Behind the bus, a long line of vehicles was starting to back up. Horns blared aggressively, echoing off the canyon walls, creating a crushing psychological pressure. From a massive pickup truck behind them, 2 burly men wearing leather jackets stepped out, looking furious. Carrying heavy steel wrenches, they marched straight toward Arthur. "What the hell is going on, old man? Why are you blocking the whole damn highway?" The tallest one yelled, rain streaming down his face. "It's just some crazy stray dog." Arthur quickly explained, trying to yank his leg free from Buster's grip. He jumped in the middle of the road, and now he won't move. "A dog? You're making me miss my flight over a worthless mutt?" the man growled. He stepped closer, pure cruelty flashing in his eyes. "Step aside. I'll throw it off the cliff myself." The man swung his leg back and delivered a devastating, brutal kick. The steel-toed boot slammed directly into Buster's already injured ribs. A sickening yelp of pain pierced the storm. The dog was thrown several feet into the air, tumbling violently across the rough asphalt. Blood began to drip from the corner of his mouth, washing away into the rain. The children pressed their faces against the glass, witnessing the horror. Many began to sob uncontrollably. "Don't hurt him. Mr. Arthur, please save him." Little Lily screamed in despair. The man sneered, taking another step forward to finish the poor animal off. But what happened next left every single person there entirely speechless. Buster, with what looked like a broken front leg, his body so battered it seemed impossible he was even breathing, staggered back to his feet. He completely ignored the violent man. Dragging his broken body step by agonizing step, he did the unthinkable. He used his skinny, bleeding frame to crawl directly underneath the front tire of the school bus. He flattened himself against the wet pavement, physically blocking the massive wheel from moving forward, looked up at the sky, and let out a long, haunting howl. He was giving them an ultimatum. "If you want this bus to move another inch, you will have to run over my dead body." This bizarre stubbornness, this utterly illogical sacrifice from a wild animal, triggered something deep inside Arthur's intuition. Ignoring the shouts of the men demanding the dog be killed, ignoring the blaring horns behind him, he threw his hands up. "Stop, wait." Something wasn't right. Why would a dog trade its life just to keep this specific vehicle from moving? Why did it keep staring at the undercarriage? His heart racing, Arthur dropped his iron bar. He pulled his phone from his pocket, turned on the flashlight, and dropped to his knees in the dark, muddy puddle. He lowered his head, shining the bright beam directly into the dark space. The bleeding dog was so desperately trying to protect. The glaring white light of the phone cut through the heavy rain, piercing into the cramped, dark underbelly of the 10-ton machine. Thick layers of mud and old grease covering the suspension system came into sharp focus. Arthur swept the beam past rusting crossbeams, past the heat radiating from the exhaust pipe, and then the light stopped. Arthur's hands began to shake violently. His breath caught in his throat. The veins at his temples throbbed wildly. It wasn't just one, but a series of horrifying truths manifesting right before his eyes. Right at the front left wheel axle, the main weight-bearing system of the entire steering mechanism, a massive, solid steel tie rod designed to hold thousands of pounds, was cracked wide open. It wasn't a hairline fracture. It was a massive, jagged tear running almost entirely through the thick metal. Only a razor-thin piece of steel, barely the width of a finger, was keeping the entire wheel axle from collapsing entirely. But that wasn't even the worst part. Because of the chaotic vibration from the broken axle, the razor-sharp edge of the snapped metal had violently rubbed against the main fuel line right next to it, slicing it wide open. Under the flashlight beam, Arthur could clearly see a shimmering liquid constantly seeping out, dripping rapidly onto the road, pooling exactly where the dog was laying. It was gasoline. Gallons of highly flammable fuel were leaking, emitting that pungent, suffocating smell. Every single puzzle piece slammed together in Arthur's mind, like a bolt of lightning. Buster wasn't crazy. He wasn't attacking him. With senses far beyond human limits, miles away at the gas station, he had heard the microscopic sound of the metal fracturing. He had smelled the leaking gas. He knew with absolute certainty that this giant machine was on the brink of total annihilation. If Arthur hadn't slammed on the brakes because of Buster's sudden appearance, if he had continued driving this bus at 40 miles an hour into the deadly curve just up ahead, with one heavy bump, the axle would have completely shattered. The bus would have lost steering, flipped multiple times, and plummeted hundreds of feet into the ravine. And with the leaking gasoline spreading all over the scorching hot engine block, a catastrophic explosion was inevitable. 40 innocent children, and Arthur himself, would have been incinerated in a massive fireball. No one would have survived. This filthy stray dog, beaten by humans, rejected and despised, had run for his life for miles, endured curses, and taken bone-shattering kicks from the very people he was trying to save, all just to deliver a warning. The phone slipped from Arthur's trembling fingers, splashing into the puddle, He slowly crawled backward, his eyes wide with horror, his face as pale as a ghost. He was entirely speechless. Seeing the old driver's terrifying reaction, the two aggressive men curiously stepped closer. The man who had just kicked the dog bent down and peered under the bus. The exact second his eyes locked onto the severed axle and the pouring gasoline, all the color drained from his face. The heavy steel wrench slipped from his trembling hands, clattering loudly against the pavement. Absolute dead silence swallowed the mountain pass. The curses stopped. The angry horns ceased. The only sound left was the falling rain, and the faint, weak whimpering of the frail Savior lying in a pool of his own blood. This shocking truth shattered every ounce of human arrogance and prejudice, leaving behind nothing but profound, chilling realization. What happened next unfolded as rapidly as the climax of an action movie. Arthur snapped out of his trance and used his most authoritative voice to scream orders for an immediate evacuation. All 40 children were instantly rushed off the deadly bus, moved safely to the rocky wall dozens of yards away, and, as if arranged by some terrifying stroke of fate, less than 10 minutes after the very last child stepped off to safety, a deafening crack echoed through the mountains. Unable to bear the weight any longer, the final thin piece of steel on the front axle completely snapped. The front end of the bus slammed violently into the asphalt, crushing the empty space beneath it. The fuel tank ruptured, and gasoline flooded the highway. If Buster hadn't stopped them, every single one of them would be lying at the bottom of that abyss. The aggressive drivers who were screaming just moments ago now stood frozen, their tears mixing freely with the rain. The man who had kicked Buster fell to his knees. He ripped off his expensive leather jacket, not caring about the mud, and gently wrapped it around the trembling, bleeding body of the dog. He pulled Buster tightly against his chest, sobbing uncontrollably like a child. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, buddy. God, please forgive me." The crowd gathered around. Women covered their mouths, choking back sobs. Men rushed to their trucks to grab personal first aid kits to bandage their four-legged savior. The children cried loudly, chanting through their tears, "Hold on, little hero! Please hold on." Just 30 minutes later, the police and emergency rescue teams arrived. After hearing the full story and inspecting the horrifying scene, the local police chief could only describe it as an impossible miracle. From a despised, starving stray at a gas station, Buster had become the greatest savior the town of Oak Creek had ever known. He was immediately rushed to the best veterinary hospital in the state in the back of a police cruiser, sirens blaring a level of respect rarely given even to humans. A few months later, Buster's story made the front page of every major newspaper. At the town hall, the mayor personally placed the Medal of Valor around Buster's neck. But the greatest, most wonderful reward wasn't that shiny gold medal. Arthur, the lonely old driver, had officially signed the adoption papers. His once empty house was now filled with joyful barks. Every single morning, Buster, wearing a brand new red collar, sits proudly in the passenger seat of Arthur's brand new school bus, welcoming the children to the sound of endless cheers and love. He will never go hungry again. He will never be cold. And he will never, ever have to run from a raised hand for the rest of his life. Animals may not have words to speak to us, but they possess a pure heart, a magnificent soul, and a sixth sense that can reach places human science and machinery simply cannot explain. My friends, if this incredible story touched your heart, and if you believe that dogs are truly guardian angels in disguise sent to protect us, please don't hesitate to hit that like button and share this video. Leave a comment down below to let us know your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss our next miraculous story. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.